The polls in South Carolina close in about 4.5 hours. So how important is today's vote? The South Carolina primary has picked the eventual GOP presidential nominee in every election since 1980. So here with some halftime analysis now, GOP strategist Ron Bonjean from Washington. Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
And Democratic political consultant Ed Espinoza from Austin, Texas. Good to see you as well.
Good to be back.
Okay, so the latest ARG poll, we have been looking at that all morning long and afternoon, putting Newt Gingrich way ahead of Mitt Romney by about 14 points. So Ed, you first, if Gingrich does win today, or maybe even come in a really close second, how might that reshape the race overall, the race for the nomination in your view?
We hear this a lot in sports, but I think it applies today in South Carolina as well, where you hear people talk about a statement win. This is a statement win for Gingrich if he pulls it off, because there's a couple things here. South Carolina is the last chance for all these other candidates to really make their point, because after this state, the campaign trail gets a lot more expensive. Florida's got a lot of big media markets, very expensive to buy TV time there. And after Florida, a lot of the states after that are either heavily Mormon, Arizona and Nevada come to mind, or you have multiple primaries on the same day. These things don't go in favor of a multi-candidate field against Romney. This is the last chance for somebody to emerge as a clear frontrunner. If Gingrich can do it, he'll have a lot left in him after today.
So, Ron, you see it the same way? This is the last, chance in which to really emerge, if not win?
Well, in Florida is going to be critical for Gingrich because, no one thought that going into South Carolina that he would be this far ahead of Mitt Romney. It's been a roller coaster, and now we have tornado watches in the state, so who knew about that? In Florida, I think Mitt Romney has the organization and the funding. And so we'll have to see if conservatives really coalesce around Gingrich. You still have Santorum out there battling with Ron Paul for third place, and Santorum could still play a little bit in Florida, but it's going to take money and organization for the long haul, and that's something Newt Gingrich doesn't have just yet.
Oh, okay, but placing a really strong second or a first would help with that money. I mean, he's been able to really benefit from these super PACs, which have, been flooding South Carolina, even Florida, with some pretty powerful ads. Ed, would that make a difference?
Are we talking about Gingrich here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so the irony here is that the guy who complained the most about super PACs in the first two primaries is now benefiting the most from the super PACs in the third primary. But yes, he absolutely benefits from that. And coming in a first place will absolutely help him. A strong second helps as well. And this may be more about the other candidates than it is about Romney. I think we can assume that Romney's got enough money and he's got enough organization to go the distance in this campaign. The question is, who is going to be the alternative to him? Who are the conservatives going to coalesce around, and who can become the alternate? With Santorum and Gingrich essentially pulling from the same voters, one of them's got to pull away from the PAC in South Carolina to become that clear alternative. And then we have what becomes a two-and-a-half-man race, depending on how you look at it with Ron Paul.
So Ron, this has been extraordinary in South Carolina because it was just days ago that many people were talking about Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich kind of splitting that conservative vote. And now the discussion is, look at this race, what appears right now to be a two-man race between Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich. So what about that conservative voting bloc in South Carolina, and whether it is indeed split? Feels like it's got to choose between, Rick Santorum or Newt Gingrich, or does it already appear as though most are gravitating toward one of the two?
Well, it looks like most of them are gravitating towards Newt Gingrich and not Rick Santorum. He has the most momentum, especially going into the week here. I mean, with Mitt Romney, it felt like my Green Bay Packers. I mean, they fumbled the ball early on when you were talking about his taxes, and I think that was his biggest liability, and he has to straighten that answer out and talk about why he's successful and not run from it. Newt Gingrich, on the other hand, has a huge problem. I think his problem is he has wild swings. Right now he's swinging way up because he's on a ride, but then he can come crashing down because he can't help himself. His own words seem to be his own best enemy here. So going into Florida, I think it's going to be behoove Gingrich to stay disciplined with a consistent message and not go wild all over the place. For Mitt Romney, it's going to have to straighten out the personal finances answer, have a clear, concise reason about why he's successful.
And I'll let you punctuate, this discussion. When we look at the state of South Carolina, it votes very differently depending on where you are, northwestern, midsection, or, south. The low country, most conservative, portion of that electorate is northwest. But how do you suppose that Midland section and low country area might be influenced by this most recent polling, if at all?
Well, with all of this, this is what this boils down to, is that Mitt Romney is a good general election candidate because he tends to have a broad, people perceive him as somebody who has broad appeal. Now, in a Republican primary, that's hard to do because you've got to get past these conservative voters, whether they're the ones in the low country or in the middle of the state. You've got to find a way to appeal to them to get to the nomination. This is the challenge that Romney has had throughout the primaries. And up until now, the more candidates there are in the race, the better it is for him because he can win these primaries with 37% and 35%.
All right.
Now, in a case like this where there's only 2 or 3 other guys left in the race, that becomes harder for him to do. So the question now is, do conservatives decide to settle for Romney, or do they decide to make a statement and go for somebody else? We don't know the answer to that, but we're about to find out.
We sure are. Ed, Ron, thanks so much to you, gentlemen. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
And, of course, you want to be sure to stick with CNN all day and into the evening for our coverage of the South Carolina primary. Of course, we have results this evening. Tune in at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for our special political coverage.